Hi there, and welcome to episode 8 of the ADHD Adult UK podcast. I'm James Brown, co-founder of ADHD Adult UK, and as usual, I'm joined by sunken-eyed, beach ball-headed, barnacle arse, Alex Connor. Alex, how are you?
Sup.
That's what we've got down to now. Sup, is it, on your list of welcomes? How are you?
Yeah.
Are you all right?
I'm very well, actually, thank you. Yeah, it's a new year, new me.
I'm not interested. So moving on. In today's episode, we're talking about what to expect ahead of a referral from your GP or a self-referral. And we have, on my text, it says a very special guest. It's not a special guest, but we've got somebody. We've got somebody
in a certain way.
In a certain way, you are very special. But we've got with us the person you may have heard us refer to as Mrs ADHD, or seen us refer to Mrs ADHD on social media. And as usual, our podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts, where we include some evidence-based psychoeducation. There's going to be lots of bad personal reflection, and then some top tips that we've been given or that we find work for what we're going to talk about today. So, Alex, do you want to introduce our special guest?
Mm-hmm.
I will, James. Thank you. Yes. Before I do, I just want to talk about why we're discussing this. So, what is a referral and what is pre-referral and what does that mean? Just a reminder, we've done the diagnosis podcast. It's the very first podcast we ever did with the terrible sound because of James. So what we're saying here, what a diagnosis is after you've seen your GP, they refer you to a psychiatrist, and only a clinical psychiatrist can make a formal diagnosis of ADHD for you. Some people, we've heard this loads of times, think that they've been given a diagnosis of ADHD, and when you drill down, it was their GP said they think they have it, or their school or university has given them the reasonable adjustments, so they think, oh, well, I've got a diagnosis of ADHD. You don't have a diagnosis of ADHD with a psychiatrist. You also don't have to go through a GP if you've gone private or if you're not in the UK. You can self-refer instead of the GP giving you that referral to a psychiatrist meeting, but this referral, the meeting with the psychiatrist, and that's an actual medical doctor, is the only way in this country to get an ADHD diagnosis. That's the one of the boring bits. We're not here to talk about diagnosis again. We want to talk about what it feels like when you've been or self-referred or when you've been given a GP's referral to a psychiatrist. Before that, how does that feel? What does it mean to you? What did it mean to us? We're gonna talk about some of the difficulties that ADHD people specifically have with that, because we often don't know what to expect because we haven't read the forms properly or because we're not explained properly. ADHD is underdiagnosed, it's underfunded. So if you're at this stage of waiting for referral, you're already quite far along the journey, further than you think. Why it's an extra special guest, I'm so happy. We've got a guest because we asked somebody who is at that stage, who has been referred, and they're waiting for their final psychiatric referral, and they probably have ADHD according to their GP and other people. And we'll be discussing this with the incredibly long-suffering, saint-like Samantha Brown. She embarks on the journey to discover if she does, in fact, have adult ADHD. And Sam's husband is our embarrassing buffoon like James Brown on the other end. And because of presumably some very poor life choices in the past, Sam seems stuck living with James. So, Sam, hello.
Hiya. That was long, wasn't it?
He was, yes. Boring, wasn't it? Yeah, James was really he does loads of editing. So you've agreed to tell us some stuff, Sam. This seems unwise.
I know. I do make lots of unwise decisions, though. That's just my life.
So
it's a pointing case, obviously, being with me, being close to the top of that list, top half, would you say?
I absolutely would.
So, would you?
Yeah. 100%. I've known Sam for quite some years, everybody. Sam, I'm going to ask you a question, but it's a leading question, because one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast, because people are starting to seek referral more and more now, even though it's massively underdiagnosed, because the symptoms of ADHD, like lots of mental health issues, become pronounced during lockdown as the change in working and living practice knocked many coping strategies into a cocked hat. It seems to be true for lots of people. So we thought it'd be really helpful to talk to somebody who isn't yet diagnosed but suspects they might. So, as James wrote for me, Sam, you've had the most ADHD career background of anyone James and I know. Can you tell us about it? Tell us about your career.
Yeah, I've been about a bit. That wasn't intended. Generally, and in my career as well.
Yes. Coincidentally, she has also been about it.
Coincidentally, I'm also a massive slag. I haven't stayed in usually until this job that I'm in now. I didn't stay in a job for longer than a year, that maximum. Partly because I get bored, partly because I've got massive imposter syndrome. And I would just presume that any minute now they're going to find out how crap I am and fire me. So I need to move on before they sack me. So I started off in accountancy. I did my AAC qualification, started off working in credit control. Then I went to work for Virgin Atlantic as cabin crew. Then I left Virgin for a sham job that wasn't really a job, selling gas and electric. And they did a flit overnight. So I ended up working for a window sales company who then I ruined everything. I wrote off his car. I did all the wrong quotes for windows. I lost him loads of money. Then I left there. Then I went to work in a gym on reception first of all. Then I was working in sales. Then I went and bought a hairdresser's with my ex-husband with one eye. And we then, I was a receptionist first of all, but then I went into colour. I was one of the first people to get a master colour expert in the country, actually. So that was really cool.
What was the second year of your career?
I haven't finished. Yeah, that was all pretty early on, actually. Yeah, and it carries on. I then went back to Virgin. Then I went back to hairdressing. Then I went into MVQs for hairdressing. Then I went into logistics with MVQs. Then I went to work in a prison. Then I went to work at Warwick, and now I'm here.
Wow, I'd forgotten the prison thing.
Yeah, it's fun.
Is accountancy an ADHD-friendly career, would you say?
Well, at first I was really into it, and then I lost interest.
Sorry, you were really into accountancy.
I was really into it. I love spreadsheets and stuff and numbers and all that. Double entry bookkeeping, yes, please.
I couldn't be more turned on than I am right now, Sam, to be honest.
Me too, James. So, Sam, what's day-to-day life like for you?
Oh, God. It's turmoil, really. It's just a shambles, just doing day-to-day tasks at work and out of work and anything, really. Sorry,
well, thanks everybody for tuning in to episode 8 of the ADHDadultUK podcast. I can probably add to the description of Sam's day-to-day life because it's chaotic. It's a fucking nightmare. It's emotional. Obviously, I've got ADHD. Sam, whilst she is waiting a diagnosis, clearly also has ADHD. So two people living in a house together with ADHD means every 5 minutes we're saying, "Where's that thing?" or "I've lost something," or forgetting to do something.
What have I come upstairs for?
Exactly. All the executive dysfunction and the lack of working memory and the poor communication and all the things which we're going to talk about in a later episode on relationships. Actually, for years when we didn't know we had ADHD, actually could be problematic. But now we know it and we can spot our traits.
That makes it all so much better.
Doesn't it? Yeah, doesn't it just?
Now we have no problems.
Particularly as Sam pointed out before we started recording that I actually tell her off for having ADHD and doing ADHD things.
All the time.
Can you give us an example?
Just focus on what I'm saying, Sam.
Oh, fuck.
Sorry.
Oh, no. Come on.
I did say focus to Sam
Sit
today.
Still, Sam. Sit still, Sam, will you? For God's sake.
Yeah, all right. I definitely just said that.
Stop getting distracted, Sam.
Do
you want me to carry on? Yeah, you do.
Not really, no. Not really, no. Not really.
Can I just say I am loving the dynamic today because normally it's horrible for me. Horrible.
Yeah. You notice I'm not actually saying
life.
I'm not actually saying much. I'm saving it up for both of you. At some point, I'm going to get my own.
And he's had no sleep, so he's weak and vulnerable at the minute, Alex.
I am.
Feel free.
Yeah, feel free pimping me
Feel
out
free
there,
to.
Sam.
I was going to say something else, but then I got distracted and forgot.
Okay, right. Let me ask you another question, Sam. That it's a question that I ask everyone really, which is why did you go and see GP? And did you suspect you have ADHD, or did they suggest it?
Yeah. So, hang on, let me think. So I was coping all right until I started going through the perimenopause, and then everything just started getting a bit mental, and I thought I was actually going insane. And then lockdown happened, and I hate routine, but I didn't realize how much I relied on routine. And when that went out the window, everything just went to shit. And it was just, I just couldn't do anything. I couldn't wash. I couldn't do just basic things, even going to the supermarket. The anxiety was so much. It was just, everything just went to shit. But I didn't know what it was originally. And back then we didn't even, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, if I can just add, you're not allowed to go to the supermarket because your impulse spending means that you'll go to the supermarket, spend £200 and come back with no food. So
shiny things.
Saying, yeah, shiny things. Exactly. Apologies to cut in, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody gets a clear picture of what your life was like before you realized you had ADHD. And equally as well, when I got diagnosed, obviously that was a moment for you, wasn't it? Because I started saying to you, I think you've probably got ADHD
well,
as well.
I was filling out the questionnaires for you, and then I realized that actually I could give examples for all of these things for myself. And I remember initially going to you and saying, do you know what, there's a few things here that I could give examples for. And then it just kind of, we just started to realize then.
It seems obvious from here, if I'm honest. You're not allowed to say
I keep saying to all my friends, how did we never know that I've got ADHD? And they all keep saying, we all knew, Sam. We all knew.
Yeah,
she says friends. She says friends, plural, but obviously she's
just one person.
Yeah, just exaggerating there, aren't you?
And that's James.
So you chose to go to the GP because you knew a little bit about it. And how was the GP conversation?
I was really scared. I remember that. And I asked to be referred to Psychiatry UK, which they didn't do, actually. Yeah. I filled out the questionnaire and everything for Psychiatry UK, which wasn't passed on because they didn't refer me to them. But yeah, I was really scared. But because I've had counselling all through my life and on antidepressants. And my counsellor had said to her, I think I might be ADHD. And she'd kind of agreed that maybe it was good for me to go for a diagnosis. So yeah. I kind of had that as well but yeah, I was still scared and still am scared that they might say, I don't know what's wrong with you.
We hear that a lot, in fact, and I felt it too. I expected them to say, no, ADHD is real and everybody else has got it, but you're just a lazy twat.
And a psychopath.
We've talked about this before on the podcast, and Sam and I have talked about it a lot. It actually took us about 3 months for you to kind of to accept in a way and really calm down. The first 3 months after we had a conversation where we said, I think it's pretty obvious you've got ADHD. You're a fucking mess most of the time, but you were a real mess for about 3 months. You were so, because it's challenging. You've built up this identity of I'm useless, I'm not very good at stuff, and then all of a sudden you start thinking, hang on a minute, is it because I've got ADHD? But the flip side to that is if you find that you haven't got ADHD, then you just confirm that you are all of those things. So it is such a scary period of time for people. And
I really struggled with that. I really struggled because it was such a big part of my identity to say, oh, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I'm useless. And I didn't want that taken away because I didn't want to have an excuse for all the things that are wrong with me. I want people to think that I'm stupid and lazy and useless. I don't. It sounds a bit weird when I say it.
It doesn't, because we often say the words excuse or reason. It's not an excuse, is it? It's a reason for some of the behaviors, some of the choices.
Yeah, but I didn't want that. I didn't want that.
That's really interesting. Did some people report grief for what they could have been if they'd known earlier? Have you experienced
I've tried not to think about that, actually. I went into it a little bit once and I stopped that avenue and I've bricked that off in my brain.
I think it's wise. I'm still slightly bitter about school. I don't get into that. So did your GP take you seriously, Sam?
Yes, they did.
That's really good. I mean, clearly, because you got referred, right? I mean, if I'm going to ask a yes/no question, I'm going to expect a yes/no answer. and did they give you homework before or homework afterwards, or neither?
Nothing. I just wasn't told anything. I was just waiting.
So they said they'll refer you, whatever the hell that means, and then they were, and then you waited, and then what happened? Did something come through? Did they phone you or send you a letter? Can you remember?
I think I got a letter.
You think? I've asked you to prepare this, Sam.
You bastard.
I told Sam that there was no preparation needed.
I have actually written it all down, but I can't read anything right now because my brain just won't compute. But yeah, they've sent me a letter just saying, I had to update my details, and then they'd ring me. And that's when I realised I hadn't been referred to Psychiatry UK because it was like a local service that hadn't been set up yet. They were trying to wait for funding. So then I updated that and then just waited more, and then had another letter. And then for an initial assessment, I had an appointment.
And do you know who that was? Can you remember?
Autism, ADHD.
No, I mean, what kind of person was it? Was it a
I
human?
don't know. I didn't meet her. She was female. She seemed really nice.
And professionally, do you know what her qualifications were?
I don't know.
No, and
she will have told me.
If you can't see Sam's face because you're not watching it on YouTube, the shame that we all have when we don't know what's going on takes us right back to school when everyone gets their textbooks out and I don't have my textbook. It's not on you, Sam. They should have made sure you understand this. I'm
sure they probably did in the beginning, but I was very, very scared.
Yeah, if you didn't, they didn't do their job. It's not on you. It's not on the patient. It's on the medical team. And so I will tell people this wasn't with a psychiatrist. It's an initial assessment, which with a range of potential clinical people who aren't able to give a diagnosis. It's before actual referral meeting, so it'll be. Did you say you were given a questionnaire or something to think about? Do you have to write anything?
Yes, no, I didn't have to write anything. It was all over the phone, and she said this is just a really quick, simple questionnaire. You don't need to go into details with any of your answers, which obviously I did go into great detail, and it went on for over an hour. I think it was supposed to be yes and no answers, but I literally from my birth I went into detail about everything. Right. And it did start from my birth all the way through.
Yeah, and just a reminder for everyone that you have to have had the symptoms of ADHD as a child to qualify for a diagnosis. That's absolutely imperative. And that's important because during the pandemic especially, a lot of the symptoms of anxiety look like ADHD, so it would be misdiagnosed if people weren't like that.
Can I just confirm? Am I needed for this? Because I've got other stuff I can do.
Very funny. I've got a question. ASRS, is that what Sam would have been asked likely, or something else? What do you think?
So not to big myself up at all or ever give myself credit. There was a little bit of preparation from me with Sam before she went to the doctor. So I made sure that she was kind of briefed and she'd already filled in the ASRS, the longer form and the 18-question one, which obviously screamed grey box, which is indicative that she's likely to have ADHD. And then I've forgotten what we were talking about. So yeah.
The preparation.
Yeah, he gave me loads of things to read, but I forgot they were even there, to be honest.
That is not unfamiliar. Right.
I think that's a natural time to take a break because clearly I'm not involved in this, so I may as well just kind of direct it and say that's the end of part 1. Join Alex and Sam because I'm going to have fucked off by then for part 2 of episode 8 of whatever it is we're doing today. See you in part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 8 of the ADHDadultUK podcast, where 2 other people are going to talk and I'm going to sit here apparently in silence. So, Alex, do you want to carry on asking questions?
Thanks, James. It's good to have a host. Hello, welcome back, Sam. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you.
I've got a question, and it is: so we've talked about what led up to you getting a referral with the psychiatrist, which is coming up soon. I don't know if you know the date. We don't need to know. What do you think is going to happen in that referral?
They said that they're going to do a video chat with me and James, and she said it's going to be pretty similar to the first chat that I had, which was fine.
Okay. Did you like it?
Well, I was really, really scared about it. And I thought James gave me loads of stuff to, like, he'd prepared to, which I didn't look at any of. And I should have just trusted myself that you just need to talk about your experiences. And they weren't trying to trick me. I think that's what I thought.
No.
I thought that they were trying to trick me, but it wasn't. It was just a general conversation.
Within 5 minutes of that general conversation, I'm pretty sure that she knew that you were ADHD. Just to clarify that we've talked about medication for ADHD in the past, and stimulant medication is obviously the most commonly prescribed. They ordered an ECG for Sam, immediately after this first initial conversation, which suggests to me they're pretty certain. They're pretty certain she's got ADHD. Yeah.
We should point out to everybody, if you don't know this, that an ECG is how they measure your heart working all right. And because the medication drugs of the stimulant drugs of ADHD affect your heart a bit, that they make sure that you're fitting well to take them. So in this video chat, Sam, who is the person that's going to be in it? Have they told you? Do you know?
I don't know.
Not their name, but
I presume it's a man. I don't know why I said that.
because he's a doctor. That is astonishing.
The first one was a woman. I presume this one's going to be a man. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry.
That's amazing.
I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, I find this really interesting that, again, we don't, and I felt the same way. I didn't know what to expect, didn't know what was going to happen, didn't know who was in there, probably didn't do the homework, and felt shame that I should probably know that, or somebody knows that. This is a kind of version of ableism, that if they don't provide stairs for people who have mobility issues, obviously that's a problem. People with ADHD who can't fill in forms and don't always understand the verbal rules if we're not paying attention, to not check that we don't know what's going to happen at the initial assessment in the GP's meeting and in the referral is, in my opinion, James and Sam, a form of ableism. Boring, though, that was, wasn't it?
And I don't know that they might have. I forget everything. Sorry, James.
No, it's okay, mate. I for once during this podcast, I had a chance to speak. Just for a split second, awful voice could be heard, and you just fucking cut me up. So just with a pair of you, carry on, honestly.
Okay, then.
I think James's mic wasn't working then. It was just blah, blah, blah for me. I don't know if you got anything.
Yeah, he's always white noise to me. I've got James.
What do you think they could have done, Sam, to make you understand what was about to happen better?
They could have told me what was about to happen.
What if you forgot it?
Oh, I do forget everything, They could have put it in writing for me. I love things in writing.
Yeah, and I think that's something we talk about a lot, isn't it? It's a very simple thing that people could do, not just in mental health community, but at work, and not buried in a list of other stuff. It's one of the main bits of advice that James and I give across all environments when we're helping people employ people with ADHD. Write it down and don't bury the lead. If you've want us to do one thing, write one thing down. Because if you tell us and we're not receptive to that, that's not our fault, Sam. It's not your fault. It's not mine that you didn't know what was going on. It's not your fault. It's like Good Will Hunting, but not Matt Damon. If you haven't seen that, it doesn't make sense.
I have, but I forget every film as soon as I've watched it. It's my superpower.
I've got one major question for you.
Go on.
What is it like living with James?
Oh my God. He's an absolute mess of in fact, it's a nightmare for both of us because he's an absolute mess of a human being. And if anything, I'm too perfect. And I know that really annoys him. So we've both got our cross to bear there.
I love this that James is a mess because working with James isn't. He puts on this work face and it's quite easy to work with James. I'm never saying that again, Brown, but it's relatively it is. It's easy and we're pretty successful together. But at home, I'm fully aware he's a hot fucking mess.
Yeah.
Give me specific examples.
Oh my God, it's just constant. I can't even. It's just constant. Where have I put this? What was I going there for? Where have I done this? Everything. He just loses everything. He forgets everything. I put in. Because I'm a PA, that's my job. Believe it or not. And no good for myself, but I'm great for other people. And I put everything, I diarise everything. But even so, he still forgets things. It's just an absolute nightmare. I mean, I'm not great either, I've got to say. But yeah, he's awful to live with. I hate it. It's a living hell.
I mean, I'm kind.
You are kind. And actually, he's
generous.
Annoyingly good at loads of stuff. I hate that about him as well.
Sam, are you aware that ADHD adults often are much worse than other people at knowing their own strengths? They can see them in others like anyone, but they don't know their own strengths. So you often talk about your weaknesses, imposter, turmoil, shambles, all those. But you don't talk about your own strengths. And James,
yeah, but I don't have any strengths.
Yeah, no,
I actually don't, though.
Yeah, it's a really good point. There's fuck all about Sam that's useful or enjoyable or pleasant. She's just
anyone would confirm that. Anyone would confirm
dried up husk of a person.
Yep.
That is a fair point. It was a bad example. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Right then. Thank you so much, Sam. That was amazing. We are going to come back to you. And Sam's agreed to talk to us after her referral conversation with a psychiatrist about how it went and how she felt about it, regardless of the outcome. James.
Okay, I'll interject. But I don't know what I've forgotten. Let's take a break anyway, because clearly I haven't slept for 3 days and I'm not working. And in part 3, we'll talk about some other stuff. I don't know what, but we'll talk about some stuff probably, or you two will anyway. So we'll see you in part 3.
Loving it.
Welcome back to part 3 of episode 8 of the ADHD Adult UK podcast. We're going to start part 3, and I can imagine Alex's heart is sinking already by playing our regular game. What's James forgotten or mislaid this week? But there's a slight twist. I'm always being told on Instagram about how negative I am when talking about ADHD. So we're going to turn it around. And today's game, Alex, today's question is actually, what did James find this week? So it's a bit of a positive. It's something that's previously lost, but being found. So you've got 3 options as usual. And if I can remind people that Alex has so far scored 2, I think, out of, is it 4 or 5? It's shit, whatever your score is anyway. So as usual, 3 options. One of them is correct and 2 of them are made up. So what have I found that was previously lost this week? So option 1 is both of Sam's bank cards, which we lost. You may remember we talked about this in a previous episode. Number 2, option 2 is the cup of tea that I famously lost 5 months ago. Have I finally found it? And then option 3 is all 4 pairs of my spectacles in the same place. So those are your 3 options.
Oh, that is a difficult one. I don't think it's a cup of tea. I think it's got broken. Somebody not very far from you threw it in the bin and doesn't want to bring it up. So I'm going to go with, and I'm pretty confident it was the 3rd one.
Yeah, you fucker, you're right.
Yeah, we have found my bank cards as well, though.
No, you found them, not me, though. This is not what Sam found this week.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, all my glasses were in the car, like on the floor in the back seat. So, and I found them all, and hence I'm wearing a pair today. So, well done, Alex. I'm really annoyed.
I even like winning at the shittest game in the world.
I know exactly, and it is the shittest game in the world. So we're gonna move on very quickly to some personal reflections, and mine are limited because whether you've listened to episode 1, I got a private diagnosis because I was in an absolute shithole of a mess and I couldn't wait. I just couldn't wait for any waiting time. So I, with help from my family, paid for Psychiatry UK to diagnose me. So I only had about a week, maybe 2 weeks between realizing I needed this and actually having my diagnostic interview. So I didn't have a lot of trepidation or fear or emotional reaction to it. I just wanted it. I just wanted it to happen. I knew I had ADHD and I just wanted those words to be spoken, that letter to be given to me, and all the drugs in the world, please and thank you, sir. So for me, there really kind of wasn't much of a process because there wasn't a lot of time. And I was also in a really dark place at the time. So I was more worried about kind of getting through the night without, dark things happening. Which isn't a sex thing, by the way, but than my emotional response. So that's my very short and dull personal reflection on the pre-diagnosis bit for me. Alex, what about you?
it's also why we do this podcast, isn't it? That meeting you had led to this, really. Mine was about 6-7 years ago, and I didn't know I had ADHD. As he's documented, I went for alcohol use problems, and exactly as Sam said earlier, I felt I was going to be tricked and didn't really know what to expect because I hadn't paid full attention. I didn't feel safe, emotionally safe, and I didn't, because my body is a temple and all that, except for the alcohol issue. I didn't want to take drugs because I didn't want to change who I was. So all of it, I felt so much turmoil and trepidation. I mean, everything Sam said today, I felt, and it was like listening to me years ago. It was almost like, it was weird, like almost identical. I completely kind of got that. I didn't like it at all. That's it. I'm not, because it's more about Sam's than mine. And we've had so many. Let's move on to top tips. Have you got anything, either of you? I'll start with James. Have you got a top tip for if you're at the pre-referral stage?
Yeah, it's a good question. The top tip for me is we know, and this is one of the reasons that this is one of our largest activities, is psychoeducation. My top tip is read everything you can about ADHD, because if you genuinely feel that you have got ADHD, you're going to be able to deal with the issues it presents with you better if you understand it. If you can spot the things that you do that are because of your ADHD, you're going to be earlier on in the process more able to not self-chastise and to give yourself a break and to realize that you're not crap and lazy and rubbish, and that these are behaviors that are governed by your brain. So learn as much as you can about ADHD in the time that you've got before you actually get that diagnosis.
Thanks, James. Sam, is there any top tip you would give to you before this point? Yeah,
I would say just trust yourself. They're not trying to trick you. The questions they're going to ask you about, they're all experiences that you've experienced. So you just need to give honest answers. And yeah, that's it, really. It's just not, there's no right or wrong answer. If you're going to be diagnosed, you want to be diagnosed on your experiences. So that's all you're doing. There's nothing to be scared of. You're just giving your past experiences.
I think that's really good. My top tip follows on from that, which is you're allowed to ask. And I didn't know this. I didn't feel like this. I didn't know that I could have phoned them up after my referral letter and said, what's going to happen? What will it be like? Just phone. They're just people on the end of a phone. You can phone and go, am I going to be tricked? You know, you can just say these things. They're just people that they don't go, no, in fact, we're going to cancel your referral because you're curious about your own health journey. Fuck off. It's not going to happen. So you are allowed to ask. You are a valid human who's allowed to have these conversations.
That's a good one, actually.
Before we finish, I'd like to have a quick chat with Sam. Alex isn't aware of this, actually, but ADHD manifests itself in many ways. And we haven't got a product of the week this week to recommend, but I'm going to recommend a tattoo. And it's actually a tattoo that Sam had recently. Do you want to tell us about that tattoo, Sam?
Not really, no.
Tell us about it.
Well, I'd had a really nice tattoo that I really like on my side, and it was from a flash, which is when you can choose from pictures they've already done. And I thought that went really well, and I'm not very good at making decisions, so I'll do that again. So very quickly after I had that one, I then saw somebody's flash, and in it was a picture of a cactus, and I thought, I like cacti, I'll have that one. And anyway, I turned up and he drew it, and I didn't like it, but I didn't want to say I don't like that, and I don't want it on a prominent place on my body, and I didn't want to offend him and make him think that I wouldn't have it on somewhere where people wouldn't see. So almost just to show him how pleased I was with it, even though I wasn't, I then had it in a really prominent place, like on the front by my stomach, and quite large, just to show him that actually it wasn't that shit. It is that shit. And I really regret it. But I think you've got to have a tattoo you regret, haven't you?
What is it, your relationship to this tattooist? Is it your
brother?
Oh,
no, I don't know him. No, I don't know him at all. We'll never meet him again. But it was really important that he knew that I didn't think he was a bad tattooist. And I couldn't cancel it. That would just be rude. So, yeah.
It would, yeah. Wow. I don't know where to go with that. That is
It's really cute,
amazing.
Almost like a cartoon cactus coloured in.
It is. It's
right on the front, like by my groin.
Yeah, a
Well,
large.
I've got a
a
Tweety
large
pie on my forehead, as you
multicolored
all know, so it's the same thing, I imagine. That is a crazy, crazy choice. So, what's our product of the week? A shit
That
tattoo
was
to
it.
avoid
Yeah,
hurting a stranger.
a shit tattoo to avoid.
Everybody's got to have a
stranger.
tattoo that they regret, haven't they?
I don't think that's in the no evidence based. That would say no.
Oh, I didn't know that was an option.
No.
On that note, I'd like to say thank you. I know, actually, I don't want to say thank you because I've barely been involved in this, and for me, it's just been.
Oh, yeah, he's still here, James. I thought you'd gone.
So, the notes I've got in front of me say that was a very special episode of the ADHD podcast.
I wrote that.
I would actually say it's easily the worst episode we've done yet. Largely because
I'd agree with that.
In it, but I'd like to thank Mrs ADHD, my wife Sam, for something. Alex, I can't say anything positive about, but he was definitely involved. If you'd like to get in touch with us about anything we've discussed anything that Alex and Sam have discussed during this podcast, then get in touch with them, not me, because obviously I'm not important, via the usual social media accounts. That's at ADHDadultUK, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye all.